I mean, I can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Maria. You just did a great job there. So hello to everybody. It's very nice to be here. It's very, I'm first of all, I thank Andrea and all the team of Her Time for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I have seen this project to grow from the very start, and I'm very proud of you, Andrea, and all of you, the work that you have done, and I'm double happy to be here because of that, because I have seen all of this growing from the beginning, and it's amazing. And I sincerely congratulate you and all of you that can profit from this space and share together. First of all, I apologize because I'm not sure of the internet connection. I'm currently not home, so I hope that we're not going to run into any problems. I've asked Maria to take care of a presentation that I prepared for you as a PowerPoint. It's very brief. It's just to have as a background, so it's not going to be. It's not very long or very intense presentation, but just for you to have some help to follow what I'm talking about. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Andy Galindo. Well, it's Andrea, but everybody calls me Andy. I'm a lawyer. I'm from Argentina, but I currently live in Spain. That is where I am right now. I've been working in human rights for over 20 years now. I used to work in an international organization called the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in Washington, D.C. And for the last 15 years, I've been working as a consultant, teaching human rights defenders, government officials, and people all around the world how to access international mechanisms. So I teach how to send cases and information to the UN and to other regional mechanisms that are available to protect human rights all over the world. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what is activism at the international level, and what does it mean to be an activist, and what is the protection that there is there, and especially what are the tools that as an activist you can have and you can find at the international level. What I want to propose to you, as I said before, I have prepared a very, very brief PowerPoint presentation so we can follow a little bit the conversation. But more than anything, I would like for you to feel free to jump in, ask questions, either just raise your hand and talk, or you can do it in the chat if you don't feel like it. Don't worry about your English. You can see my English is not as strong, so feel free to jump in and don't be shy, okay? So Maria, if we can share the presentation at this point.
Yeah, I'll share it in a minute.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, I hope you can see it.
Yes.
Wait, I will press the slideshow.
Okay,
So
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So as I was saying before, we are going to talk about activism at the international level. And the first thing I want to talk about is, what does it mean to be an activist? What does it mean? What is activism? So I put here some examples of activists that you may know, like Malala and Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, probably, or maybe you know, or maybe you don't know about Emmeline. But I wanted to show you, unfortunately, Malala's is not, it doesn't have a date, but activism is not a new thing. As you can see, Emmeline has been an activist in the 1800s. So this is a very old job to have, or a very old thing to do. She was a person in England that was championed for women to get voting rights. Nelson Mandela, I'm sure you all hear about him many, many times. He was champion against apartheid in South Africa, and has become, of course, an icon in fighting against racism and all forms of discrimination. Martin Luther King was also champion against racism in the US. And Malala is currently a person working to get education for women, especially young women all over the world. I think for the four of them became activists because of personal experience and their personal trauma or things that they suffer in their own life. But to be an activist doesn't mean that you have to be a person that suffers a human rights violation or anything like that. There are a lot of situations in which you become an activist because you are interested in a cause, or because you have someone that suffered a human rights violation and you want to help that person, or you became aware of a situation because of other people that surround you, or simply because you feel that impulse or that need. So it doesn't mean that you need to be a person that suffered a human rights violation to become or be a person that becomes an activist. If you can pass to the next one, Maria. Sorry. So when we talk about activists, we can be talking about a person, a group, or an organization. And this distinction sometimes is very important because countries tend to put limitations to when people can protest or how people can be organized. At the international level, there is no requirement to consider yourself an activist or what we call a human rights defender in terms of whether you are legally recognized, whether you have the permission of the state or the government to be organized or anything like that. So that's why it's important to make this distinction between a person, a group, or an organization, because sometimes, states say, well, this group of people are not recognized legally in the country, and therefore we don't recognize their voice at the international level. So at the international level, it doesn't matter what the government says. If you are organized with other people, either informally, occasionally, or for one concrete thing, you can also be considered an activist or a human rights defender. So what is a human rights defender? In general terms, a human rights defender is a person that works to protect human rights, or an activist. Yes, activism is also a word that we use many times at the internal level, and it also reminds us of or give us an idea of this social impact of what you do. But a human rights defender is a person that works to protect human rights. And it can be a specific right, it can be in general for the protection of human rights, it can be for the protection of certain groups, very, very specific groups, like this X group of people. There are a lot of people that became an activist or a human rights defender, for example, because of a case of a person that they lost. So it could be about a concrete case or a concrete person, and then it grow into something else. The important thing to be considered a human rights defender or an activist at the international level is that you are working to protect the rights not only of yourself, but other people. And because of this working to protect other people's rights, there is a special protection that you have as an activist at the international level. Why? Because if you suffer any kind of persecution from the state, from private groups, from anybody, there is not only the risk that you suffer yourself, your individual risk, but also the risk that other people become unprotected because you are not there. So because you are working for other people, because you are working to protect or to improve the life of other people, you have a special protection, because it's not only about the person that is doing certain action or trying to achieve certain goal, but it's also about the people that is being protected by these actions. So at the international level, the only requirement to be considered a human rights defender and to have this special protection is that you embrace the nonviolent action. So if you become a group and you are non-violent, you are considered a human rights defender. What defines an activist or a human rights defender at the international level is what you do, no, not who you are, for instance. So it's about the actions that you do, the projects that you have, the activities that you put forward, and it's not about whether you are paid for it, whether you do this all the time, whether this is a job for you or it's something that you do in your free time, whether you do this occasionally, whether you do this because of one concrete situation and then you stop doing this. So all of this doesn't matter. So there is no requirement to have this special protection to be in certain way. So it's completely about what you are doing at a certain specific point. So if you are working to protect other people's rights, whether alone or with other people, then you can be considered a human rights defender. What is the protection that you have at the international level? On the one hand, there is a declaration about human rights defenders that establishes who can be considered a human rights defender and what are the specific rights that need to be protected. Of course, if you are an activist, you need to be able to express yourself freely without fear of being punished because of your expressions. You have to be able to organize yourself with other people. So you have the right to form groups, form associations. In other words, to organize yourself to achieve whatever it is that you need to achieve or you want to achieve. There is also the right to go places, movement, freedom of movement. So all these rights, they are not exclusive for human rights defenders, of course. Everybody has these rights. But when you are a defender, it means that these rights are specifically or specially protected. What does this mean? It means that the state has certain responsibilities to make sure that you can organize, that you can express yourself, that you can achieve the goals that you want to achieve. So because of this protecting other people, there is this special protection that you will have, not because of you yourself that you are so special, but because you are protecting or you are working to protect other people. So freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom of association are three of the main things that you have special protection because you are working or you are doing activism internally or internationally. There is also no requirement for you to declare yourself as an international defender or as an international activist. In fact, most activists around the world work at the local level or at the regional level. So not necessarily at the international level. So you don't have to have an international profile to become a human rights defender or to be considered or to have this special protection. It's just whatever you are doing at the internal level that allowed you to have this special protection. Because this is a declaration, it applies to all the states that are part of the UN. So some protections at the international level are through declarations, and some protections are through covenants or conventions, which means that the state has to ratify it, has to be part of it. In this case, because this is a declaration, every state that is part of the UN has these obligations. So you have this protection wherever you are, from whatever country you are, if your country or if the country is part of the UN. Also, this protection is for people, not only nationals of the country, but everybody that is under what we lawyers call the jurisdiction of the states. That means that if the state has power over you, even if you are visiting a country, let's say that you are protesting against climate change, for instance, and you go to another country. When you are in that country, that state has power over you. They can put you in jail. They can kick you out of the country. So once you are there, the country also has obligations over you because they have this power. So it doesn't mean that because you are not national or because you don't live there, they don't have any obligations. So let me see. We have some questions here. Bianca says, did you encounter situations in which your freedom as an activist to be restricted? Me personally, yes, I have. I was working as an activist in Argentina, and sometimes we wanted to organize, for example, a protest, and the state tried to limit our right to protest. You know that when you want to protest, the state has certain abilities to restrict this, but these restrictions have to be very specifically pointed by the law in a way that the restriction cannot be so you cannot protest. So they can tell you, okay, you have the right to protest, but I'm going to make a regulation that limits the hours of the day in which you can protest. For example, you cannot protest, I don't know, at the time that kids come out of the school, because this will affect their right of education. For instance, they could say that. Or they could say, your right can be limited to this space, or not that space, or this day, because it's a national day, you cannot protest. Please protest tomorrow. Things like this, they can do. These restrictions have to be prior to you protesting. It can't be that you ask for permission, or it's not permission. They don't have to give you permission to protest. Sometimes you have to fill forms or do something in the administration to let them know that you are going to protest. So they can, I don't know, put police in place, or have a security scheme in place to make sure that there is no conflict between protesters and other people. Or they need to cut the traffic of certain streets and things like that. So you need to know to let them know, and that's okay. But this notification cannot be construed to permission for you to protest. They cannot, switch it over and say, okay, I don't authorize this protest because I don't want to. So any kind of restriction that is that they can do, it has to be prior established by law, and it has to justify some means. They cannot say, no, you cannot protest today because I don't feel like it. So it has to be prior to the situation. They cannot come up with new requirements for you to protest, for instance, or to confine you to a certain place or whatever that wasn't there before. So if everybody is protesting, I don't know, in front of the Congress every day, and then you go there, and because you are protesting, I don't know, to achieve abortion rights, which is something that is going on right now all over the world, and they don't want you to do that, and so they tell you, no, you cannot protest here because from today we don't allow protest in this square. You have to go to the next square. It's like, no, if everybody is protesting here, why can't I protest here? So this is also very, very important. The commitment that, or the regulations cannot be made up as they go. It has to be in the law, and it has to be prior. In the situation we encountered in Argentina was exactly that. We were doing a protest because in Argentina, we had a lot of laws, amnesty laws that protected the military government. So when I was working there, it was after the military government, and we were trying to get rid of these amnesty laws. And the government didn't want us protesting that day, and we went anyway. They tried to put us a fine, and we fought this fine in the courts, and we won. So they couldn't give us this fine because we were complying with all the regulations. We give prior notice. They told us that we couldn't protest, and we protested anyway because the reasons that they gave us and saying that we couldn't protest were not set by the law, and we protested anyway. So the police came and they gave us a fine as an organization, and we went to the court and we said, this fine is not legal because we were complying with all the regulations, and so we have the right to protest in this instance, and we won. So in that example, we actually got away with it, which sometimes doesn't happen, but that time it worked. So I have. Okay, Andrea is asking what happens when member states of the UN do not implement these protections and even breach them by putting activists in danger. Do the states actually face consequences? This is a very good question, Andrea. They can face consequences, but this is common at the international level, or it's a common thing with international law. The consequences are not necessarily legal consequences. In other words, if the state has an obligation at the international level and they don't comply with these obligations, the consequences are normally political consequences. And in fact, this is one of the reasons why activism at the international level is so important, because countries, states in general, they do things that they can because they can, not because they legally can, but because they politically can. You know, this for sure. So countries that are more powerful, that have more money, that have more influence, they do whatever they want. A country that is smaller, that has less influence, that has less power, maybe they do whatever they want internally, but internationally, not so much. So this is true for international relationships in general, and it is true for human rights as well. So countries at the international level, they do things sometimes that they don't supposed to do. They don't comply with things that they're supposed to comply with. And if no one is there, no one is protesting, if no one is saying this country is doing this and that and they don't supposed to be doing this, then there is no political price to pay for what they are doing or not doing. So you have an international system. You have in the UN, for instance, you have a Human Rights Council, and activists, human rights defenders send information there. They go there, they participate in meetings, they lobby for resolutions to be passed. They do a lot of things at the international level. And one of the things that they do is to call the states in what they are doing or not doing, like call them out, no? So if you go there and you call them out, and you say, you know, this country is not complying with their obligations, then there is a price to pay. And the more you push, the more you use the systems, the more you send information, the more you use the different mechanisms that are available, the more politically expensive it is for the country not to comply with their obligations. So in a way, there is a system there. If you learn how to use it, and if you know where to push, this is not automatic, of course. It takes time, it takes a lot of strategy, it takes a lot of planning, it takes a lot of working with other organizations from the country, international organizations, regional organizations. So the more you have more people involved in a subject, involved in an issue, and putting pressure and pressure and pressure against the state, the more politically expensive it is for the state not to do something. As you can imagine, pressuring a bigger country or a politically more important country, let's say, it's more difficult than to pressure a smaller country, because countries, you know, they protect themselves as well. So there are a lot of economic interests, political interests that come into place when it comes to international organizations or international diplomacy. But in any event, I guess the answer to the question is it depends. If somebody is watching, if somebody is pushing, if somebody is there pointing at the state, then there is a price to pay, and then there are consequences. These consequences could be even economic consequences. Think about economic sanctions that sometimes countries put into other countries. Normally, these discussions happen at the UN level. And not for international sanctions, because economic sanctions, because I understand that they are very appealing theoretically, but normally when you have a human rights issue, it's a lot connected with poverty, it's a lot connected with people in vulnerable situations, it's a lot connected with minorities. And when you have economic sanctions, these sanctions will affect those people more than the rich people in the country. So sometimes, in order to protect these people, you try to reach international level. And then you get to a point where you can push for economic sanctions. But at the end of the day, these sanctions will end up affecting these people that you are, the very same people that you are trying to protect. So I am very cautious about using economic sanctions. And the examples that you have in the world today, I don't know, Cuba is under economic sanctions. Some countries around the world in Africa are under economic sanctions. And these are poor countries already. So economic sanctions tend to affect more their economy. So they will get worse. So in a way, we have to be very, very careful when you push for this kind of situations. Of course, it doesn't happen at the international level, not at the UN level anyway, is that nobody can be put in jail because of a case that you bring at the UN level. There is the International Criminal Court that is for crimes against humanity, crimes, war crimes and things like that. That is very specific. But in general, when you talk about human rights at the international level, we are talking about the responsibility of the state as an entity, not responsibility of individuals. So sometimes it can be kind of frustrating when you look at this, because you say, okay, you have all this system, all these mechanisms that are in place. You can send cases, you can send information, you can have reports on the country, but if the country doesn't comply, nothing happens. Well, it's like other things that you can achieve at the internal level. So if you are an activist at the internal level and you want a law to change, you are not going to send a letter to the government saying, I want this law changed, and that's it. That's not going to achieve anything. You have to work hard. You have to learn inside what's happening inside the Congress or the Parliament or whatever legislative institution you have. You have to make contacts. You have to lobby. You have to reach other organizations, get together. You have to develop strategies to improve the situation or to improve the amount of people that knows about this problem and that are identified with your claim, right? So if you want to change a law, you have to do all of this. You have to reach other people to join your cause. And you do a lot of these things to push for the government to change the law. You don't ask, and that's it. And it doesn't happen. So at the international level, it's the same thing. So you do a lot of things, and then you have to push for the government to comply with their obligations. It's not only just asking. If the countries were to do what they have to do, we wouldn't need an international organization at all, because they will comply with their obligations and that's it. The problem is that they don't. So that's why we have these systems in place. Okay, let me see. We have, I think, another question. Have you ever experienced an activist burnout? If so, how did you deal with it? Okay. Somebody's asking me a question or making a comment about Romania, but I can't understand it. So I think about the law 60 of 91. I'm guessing if I understand this correctly,
sorry,
is to restrict.
It's like you were talking about the right to protest, how the government can restrict it. I just pasted the law that explains the restrictions in Romania in case anyone needs it. Because
okay, perfect. Thank you. That's perfect. Yeah. So if you mean an activist burnout, you mean me personally?
I don't know, you personally, or if you talked or worked with people who have experienced such feelings.
Yeah, of course, all the time. You know, I work with human rights defenders. I know that I am technically a human rights defender because I am working at the international level, but I consider myself privileged because I live in Spain. I'm not persecuted for my actions, but I work with a lot of people from all over the world that are being persecuted, being put in jail, and they are, they have threats. And it's very difficult because normally a person that is working in human rights, they don't have the perception that they are under risk, but the people that they are trying to help are under risk. So many times I used to work in the Inter-American Commission in Washington, as I told you guys before, and I was in charge of the Human Rights Defenders Unit. So, we travel throughout Latin America. There are some countries in Latin America where it's very, very dangerous to be a human rights defender. Brazil, Guatemala, Mexico, it changes, Colombia, it changes over time, but these countries are always places where people are killed because of protecting human rights of other people. And I had this conversation with so many people saying, you are under a lot of stress, you are under a lot of pressure, but you are also in danger because people are, sometimes they are being followed or sometimes they receive threats. And it's like a burnout. You see it happening, but they don't see it happening. They can't sleep, they can't eat, they need to leave the country and they don't want to. And, sometimes their families are in danger. People, their colleagues, sometimes they suffer harm, and so it's very, very difficult. I think it's difficult to find the balance between trying to help other people and not only not being killed in the process, because sometimes that's out of your hands, but also not be burned in the process, because if you are killed or burned, it's not useful for anybody also. So I think this, it's very, very usual that people, because they are taking care of other people and they are very worried about other people, and that's why they are actually activists, because they are worried about other people. They have this sensitivity for whatever reason, but they have it. And so they take care of that and they don't take care of themselves. We did a lot of trainings also about this, about taking care of yourself, because if you are not okay, even if you don't realize it, it's difficult to help other people. So I always say that you have to be able to keep your strength and to keep yourself healthy in a holistic way, to be able to really help other people. Otherwise, you are, even sometimes if you don't notice, you transmit this burden that you have. For instance, when I was working in a case, I brought a case into an international court of human rights of a person who was tortured. And for me, it was a difficult case because my husband at that time, he was tortured as well. So I sort of like connected with this person who was the victim because of my husband, because of the situation was very similar. And at certain point, I realized that I was transmitting all this anguish that I had and all these expectations that I have about the case that came from my personal experience into him without noticing, I didn't mean to do that. Of course, I wanted to help him. I wanted to do my job. I wanted to represent him. I wanted to win the case for him. But at the same time, I have all this anguish and I have all these feelings that came from my personal experience. So I work with the person that helped me to deal with this, so I can help this other person without, bringing my own things into the situation. So I think in general, this is very, very important to take the time to unwind, to talk to someone. For example, normally when you are working in certain situations, you see people suffering, you see, you feel all this energy of suffering when something happened. I don't know, I work, for example, with communities in Guatemala that were that suffer a lot of killings, like massive killings in the community. And you go to that community and you interview survivors and people that have lost everybody or more, almost everybody in their family in a very violent way, and you sort of breathe this sadness and all what's in the air somehow, And so after that, you need to talk with someone. You need to talk about this. You need to have a space to sort of empty yourself from all of this energy, because otherwise you bring it with you to the next thing, So I think as important as it is to take time to work for other people, it's important to take time to work on yourself as well, because otherwise you're not going to get very far. You're going to get burned out very quickly. Okay, I think I have another question. Any tips on how to deal with difficult bureaucracy, making it hard for activists to obtain their status as an NGO? Yeah, this is a difficult thing. I mean, bureaucracy in of itself is a difficult thing. It's an animal that self-preserves. So there's a lot of systems in place, especially for organizations when you want to become legalized and organized. There are a lot of regulations and things that they put, especially in countries where the state is not very interested in people organizing. So this is also very usual and not uncommon everywhere in the world, in some countries more than others. So one useful thing is to know this international protection and to have connection. For example, at the UN level, there is a special rapporteur for human rights defenders. This special rapporteur has an office in Geneva, has a person that takes care of the rapporteurship. They receive information and they have contacts with people from all over the world. So this kind of relationship that you can establish and nurture over time helps you exactly to do that, to put some pressure in the government, for example, to accept an organization. I always say that the game is how to get the UN or whatever international body, but in this case, the UN, to say what you need them to say, and then how to use it at the internal level. So if you are an organization that are working nationally and you want to get help at the international level, you establish this connection with this system, with the special rapporteur on human rights defenders, you send information, you contact them, you ask them to visit, or you ask them to inform about what's happening in the country. You can connect with other organizations that are probably having the same problem. And so with all this information that different organizations are sending, at the end of the day, what happens is that the rapporteurship will talk about this in the report. And once they talk about it, it becomes an issue for the state to work on. So then you can go to the state and say, look, the UN is saying, the special rapporteur on human rights defender is saying that in this country, there is a problem with this organization to get recognition from the state, or that the bureaucratic system that you have in place is preventing organizations from forming or organizing legally or obtaining international funds. This happens all the time. So once you have this documented and the UN has this information from one organization, another organization, and another organization, because chances are that this is not happening only to one organization, then they will put it in the report. Once it's in the report, you can go to the state and say, look, the UN is saying that you have this problem and that you have to do this, this, and that to solve this problem. So there you have the help of the system that you use in your favor. So this is how it works. This is how you can best use the mechanisms that are at the international level. First, know the mechanism. Second, use it for the mechanism or the UN to say what you need. And then with that, that's not the end of the road. With that, with whatever the UN said, or the report that they did, or the press release that they issue, or whatever it is that you achieve, you know, the means that you got the UN to talk about the issue, then you go to the state and say, look, not only you have this obligation because the Declaration for Human Rights Defenders says that you have this obligation, but in this report, they are telling you that you are not complying with your obligations, and that you need, normally anything that the UN says comes with the recommendations. So you have these recommendations and these things that you need to do. It's also an opportunity at the UN level. The Human Rights Council, they do something that is called UPR, which is called Universal Periodic Review. So every 3 years or 5 years, depends, a country is under review by the Human Rights Council. And so at that point, there is also an opportunity to send information to the UN, because they are going to review your country on issues that are of importance to you or to your organization. And at that point, when the Human Rights Council issues the report, they will include this information that you send, and they will make recommendations about it. So this is one thing that you have always available every X amount of years. You can also use the special rapporteurs in human rights defenders, but there are also special rapporteurs on many issues. So if you are working on women's rights, if you are working on prison rights, if you are working on health issues, if you are working on environmental issues, if you are working with indigenous communities, all of these issues, they have a special rapporteur for that issue: violence against women or kids, or violence in armed conflicts. There are like 57 thematic rapporteurs. The one on human rights defenders is one of them, on torture, for example. So you can, you know, if you are working on any of these issues, one very, very good thing to do is to get connected with the special rapporteur on the issue. They receive the information. If they know you over time, they trust you. So they know that the information that you send, it's good information. Think that at the UN level, they receive information from all over the world. How do they know that this information is good? First, because of the way that the information is written, if it's documented. This is also very important. If you are sending, I don't know, something that was published in the newspaper, for example, and you say, you know, I am worried because the newspaper said that in this prison they are torturing women. So please do something about it. The UN is not going to do anything about this, because this is not contrasted information. It's in the newspaper, but you don't have a connection with the case. You are just worried about this. You know, you woke up this morning and you send this over because somebody has to do something about this. This is not how it works. But if you are an organization that is working on this issue, you issue reports every year, you do campaigns about this, you are trying to get the law to change to protect women that are in prison, you are trying to get the police to get training on violence against women or on torture, and you know, you work with different rapporteurs on these issues, and so they know you, and so if you send information, they know that they can trust this information, and they will do something about it with this information. So it will go to the report. They will take it into account to make their conclusions and to make their observations and to make their recommendations to the state. Somebody was asking me how to get in touch, I think. See. How you can get connected? Is there a website? Yes, there is a website. And I will send you the, let me see if I can write this here. I'm sorry. Okay, let me see. OHCHR.org. Sorry that you have, yeah. This is the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights.org. In this website, you will find at the top level human rights bodies, you will have special rapporteurs, and you will see there the list of the special mechanisms. There are also rapporteurs that are specialized in countries. I don't think there is one in Romania, that's unlikely. But you will see the thematic rapporteurs, and you will have contact information, you will see the reports there, you will see their agenda there, what they are working on. From time to time, they do visits to countries. It's true that it's not easy to get the special rapporteur to visit any given country because they have budget to do 2 visits a year from all over the world. But it's not that difficult to invite them to a conference at the university, for instance, and things like that. So, you know, to get their attention. And everything is about to call their attention. So how do you get them to pay attention to your issue? As I told you, with showing that you are working on this, that this is an issue that you are not the only person that is worried about. There are other organizations, organizing with other, you know, getting together, doing networks with other organizations work quite well to arrive at the international level. Connected with international organizations that are working on that issue in Geneva or anywhere else. Normally, the offices of the High Commissioner are in Geneva. That's the headquarters. So there are a lot of international organizations that have offices in Geneva, but they have also offices in several places in Europe, for instance. So, you know, you get in contact with these other organizations, and all of this helps you to get this contact with a special rapporteur, with any specific special rapporteur. And normally, you know, when they have to do the report, they need information from what's going on in the country. Imagine that any special rapporteur, they are in charge of knowing the situation on their own issue. So let's say that you are talking about the special rapporteur on violence against women. So this person has to report on what's happening on violence against women from all over the world. So she cannot go everywhere, and she cannot personally, or whoever is working with her, gather the information from every country. So what they do, they rely on the information that they receive. So for them to receive information is something that they need to do their job. And so you can count on this to use this in your favor. So it's not only that you want them to say something, but they need your information to be able to say things, to do their job. Normally, they also work in a year. Special rapporteur does 2 kinds of reports. A report on the issue, general report on what's happening all around the world on that specific issue. And sometimes they issue a thematic report. So they specifically talk about, I don't know, if it's violence against women, violence against children, for instance, in school, to give you an example. And so maybe this year they are focusing on the certain specific issue that you are interested on. So, you know this because you get into their website, you check what they are working on, and in every report, they will tell you that what they are working as the next report. Normally, they also do, for example, they call for information. So they say, we are working on a report on such and such thing, and there is a questionnaire for you to answer, for instance. So to be aware, to follow what they are doing, and to exchange information with them will help you. So if you have an issue, if you have a situation, if you have a problem as a human rights defender because you are being watched or followed or whatever, because you already have establish this relation, this will help you to get the protection that you need at the international level as well. Okay. Let's see. I think I have no more questions here. Okay. So Maria, can we pass the next?
Yeah, I will press it now. Can you see it?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Just to recap a little bit what we have been talking about, I wanted to share with you the definition of a human rights defender. So it's used to describe a people who individually or with others act to promote or protect human rights in a peaceful manner. Remember that peaceful is, if you want, the only requirement that there is to have the protection at the international level. If you're not peaceful, you will not be considered a human rights defender. Anything else doesn't matter. Whether you are paid, not paid, organized, unorganized, whether it's something that you did once a week, once a month, or once in your lifetime, it's the same to get the protection. The only requirement is that it's peaceful. And then, yeah, so it's described or is defined or identified by the description of their actions and the context in which they work. Okay. Well, so the other thing that I wanted to share with you, can we pass to the next one, Maria? Is the tools. We have talked about this already, but just to recap or remind you, when you work on an issue at the internal level, so normally what you do campaigns, you get signatures from people. Let's say that you want to achieve better protection or better access for public schools for girls, for instance, because in your country or in your city or in your region, the literacy of men and women are different, to give you an example. So, you want, in this case, you want public policy to be changed. Sometimes law is needed, change in law is needed. Sometimes there is a law that establishes that men and women are equal, but because there is no policy following the law, it doesn't mean that then in reality there is equality. Sometimes the equality is provided by law, but then in reality it doesn't happen, right? So let's say that you want to achieve this real equality that is already in the law. So what you want is a policy to be enacted or to be changed. So you want the states to, to reach kids or young girls that are outside big cities because they don't have access to school. So that means that they have to put public transportation to get them to school, or that they have to sensitize their parents to send them to school, or that they have to provide for money for them to be able to buy the clothes that they need or the books that they need, or to get money or to get food for them because they, sometimes they are poor and they don't eat more than once a day, so they need to be fed in the school, all of these things, right? So what do you do at the internal level? You launch a campaign, you find signatures of people, asking for a petition for the government to enact this public policy, or one concrete thing. So a school bus, for instance. So, you go to the office of the mayor and you ask the mayor that he or she, supports your cause, because this goes to a state level or to, the regional level, and they cannot enact the law, but they can help you to get this change or to enact the law or enact the policy. So, you lobby your representatives, the one that you have closer to you, more to your reach, to go up in the hierarchy of the bureaucracy or the state. So you do campaigns, you do reports, you do, promotion in the streets, you do press releases. And then at the international level, once you reach you reach a point in which it doesn't happen. So you do all of this and nothing happens, nothing changes. So at the international level, what you have is another set of tools that will help you amplify this. Because this problem that you have in this specific city or in this specific region in your country, it's also happening in another country or in another region of your country. So you amplify this. You, from local, you go regional, you go national, and then you go international. So you link with other people with the same problem, with the same situation, and you use similar tools. It's just amplified at the international level. So you also do press releases, you do lobbying, you push for changing in legislation, but you have help from the UN or from another international mechanisms to help you push for the government. And it's like not take them sort of into a corner, into a point where it's more expensive politically for them not to do it than to do it. So, you raise the stakes in a way. And this is what you can achieve at the international level. It's just to say, somebody's watching and they know that you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So either you do it or I'll come back and I'll come back next year. And every year you will have a UN resolution saying that you have to do this, that you are not doing your job, that you are not complying with your responsibilities, so that you are not doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. And if you want to belong to an international organization, if you want to be part of the international scene, you have to be in order with your affairs. No, so this is a game of naming and shaming, as it is called. So you go and you name and you shame. And the more you shame, the more you push them into a corner until they have no choice but to do something. Sometimes it's less expensive to do something than not to do it. So that's the goal of any international intervention. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to share with you, Maria, if we can pass to the next one. This is, maybe we can copy this into the, yeah.
Can you see? Because I don't know if I'm.
Yeah, that's perfect. Just
Yeah, okay.
if you can copy the address and put it in the chat.
Oh, okay. Well,
This is something that I found. I used to work with this organization. This is very useful thing to when you work in human rights, because especially if you work in education, but in general.
Excuse me, I will stop screen sharing for a moment so I can copy the link, if that's okay.
Yes, yeah, that's okay, because yeah, that's perfect. In this, what I'm sharing with you is it's part of a human rights curriculum that is developed through stories of human rights defenders. Storytelling it's a powerful way to achieve whatever it is that you are trying to achieve. It's also a very powerful tool, as we were talking about tools to help you to improve the situation or to achieve any goal. Storytelling is one very, very powerful tool. And this book collects stories of human rights defenders from all over the world, and it's developed as a tool to educate for human rights education, but it can be useful for other things. And since I found that it was in Romanian, I decided to share it with you because you might find it useful, if nothing else, as an inspiration. But it can also be a useful, concrete tool to tell a story, because you will find there international human rights defenders or defenders from all over the world, but you will also find local defenders. So you will find their story, their struggle, and their fight in your own country. So I think that could be a useful tool for all of you. And with that, I think I'm going to stop talking. I don't know if there is any more questions.
If you have any more questions, you can send them in the chat and I'll read them if you don't want to read them.
Okay.
You don't need to be shy. I know the meeting
It's okay. I think they
took
have
a little longer, but
Some-
I'm really glad. It was really nice. I'm really thankful for you, Andy, for coming here and teaching me something, because I truly didn't know a lot about activism before, and I actually feel like I ended up with something new at the end of the day, and I hope everyone did. I hope that at the end of the session you will have something new, you'll know something new. And I'm also really grateful that you took some time to be here and genuinely support our activity. And with that being said, I would like to remind everyone again that you can find us on social media. You have links down below in the chat. You can support us on Patreon, on Instagram, and on Facebook. And I truly advise you to join our community because it truly changed my life experience so much. I got to be around people who helped me develop as a person, who helped me develop professionally. And I got to be here tonight along with Andy, who, again, I'm really glad that you came here because I got to learn something new, and I really like that. And that's all from me. I hope it was okay and that I didn't scare you away with my chaotic speech at the beginning.
Well, Maria, I want to thank you as well for this opportunity. It was great to have you here, to be here, and to have all of you here. And I'm available for any questions that anybody can have later on, and they can write to me with no problem. Okay? Thank you.
See you tomorrow for our last
Thank you.
webinar.
Have a great night.